Greetings VFI supporters and anyone else watching this video. Now I'm going to start this video with a warning that if you don't have a sense of humor, but you do have the blood pressure problem, you probably shouldn't watch this video. Well, don't worry about it folks, we're gonna have fun together. Now if you're still watching, you probably know that we're approaching the 25th of December 2024. And as everyone knows, it's a very special holiday. And I am talking, of course, about Hanukkah. That's right, friends. This year, Hanukkah, also known as the Feast of Dedication, starts on the evening of December 25th. This doesn't happen very often, and if you're one of those people who always wondered why Jewish holidays move around on the calendar from year to year, the explanation is simple. Jewish holidays are reckoned according to a lunar calendar, while the Gregorian calendar, which is used by most of the secular world, is reckoned according to a solar calendar. Now, Hanukkah is celebrated every year from the 25th day of the Hebrew month of Kislev to the 3rd day in the Hebrew month of Tevet, but those dates fall on different Gregorian calendar days every year. So with all that in mind, I hope you still believe in miracles because it's time to talk about some that happened a long time ago, and a few more that are happening right now. That's just ahead on this special holiday message from Vision for Israel. Friends, let's start with a brief reminder of the true meaning of Hanukkah. And to get this said right at the beginning, this holiday is not mandated by the Bible the way Passover, Sukkot, and the Shabbat are. I think it's also worth mentioning that for most of Jewish history, Hanukkah was considered a minor holiday. In modern times, it became more significant because it became what Jewish people living in the Western countries got to celebrate because they weren't celebrating Christmas in December. Of course, for many of us Jews who grew up in America, celebrating Christmas was going to a local Asian restaurant. And by the way, friends, Christmas also wasn't the massively important religious or cultural event it is today for most of the 2,000 years of Christian history. That's a fairly recent development, and Hanukkah's subsequent rise in cultural importance is part of that story. So to go back to the beginning, Hanukkah comes from a story that is told in two ancient books that the Jewish rabbis value but don't think they should be part of the biblical canon, while the Catholic and Greek Orthodox churches both think they should be included. Hanukkah, or the Feast of Dedication, is also mentioned but not necessarily endorsed, much less mandated in the New Testament, and we'll talk about that much more later. As we can read in those two ancient books, titled the First and Second Book of Maccabees, Hanukkah, or the Feast of Dedication, has its origins in a war that was fought in the Holy Land in the 2nd century BC. At that time, Jerusalem and most of the rest of the land of Israel were under the control of the Seleucid Empire, which was one of the successors to the empire of Alexander the Great. Alexander led a Greek army that conquered most of the known world at the time, but then he died in 323 BC and his generals took control of different parts of his empire. The Holy Land came under the jurisdiction of the Seleucids, who tried to impose their pagan Greek culture on all their subjects. Now, some of the Jewish residents of the country were ready to assimilate into the predominant culture, but many were not. One family in particular, led by the patriarch known as Matisyahu ben Yochanan and his sons, were fiercely opposed to this idea and led an armed revolt against the Seleucid ruler who was named Antiochus IV, also known as Epiphanes, in 167 BC. By the way, that took place exactly in the area where our home for Vision for Israel is located, in the center of Israel, halfway between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. Now, one of the sons of Matisyahu was named Judas, and he was given the nickname Maccabeus, or the Hammer, because of his prowess as a leader of fighting men on the battlefield. He is given much of the credit for the victory of the Jewish rebels, who were able to win over the numerically and technologically superior Seleucid forces and re-establish Jewish sovereignty over Jerusalem and much of the land of Israel in 165 BC, following 2 years of bloody conflict. Now, once that was accomplished, there was a desire to cleanse the land of the Greek pagan culture that had dominated it. This process of rededicating the land of Israel to the purposes that God had given it, along with a desire to make up for the lost holiday of Sukkot, is why this new festival was called the Feast of Dedication, lasting for 8 days. That much is indisputable historical fact. But after that, things start to get a little bit murky, and it's difficult, if not impossible, to be sure where historical fact leaves off and legends that grew over time start. Now, I hope I don't cause too much angst amongst my loyal viewers with this next part, but here we go. It was Judas Maccabeus who, according to the historian Josephus, decided that since the holiday of Sukkot had been skipped that year because of the intensity of the fighting, an 8-day holiday should be observed in its stead. That's the most likely reason for why Hanukkah, or the Feast of Dedication, or the Feast of Lights, Festival of Lights, is also known and came to have 8 days to it. Now, there's another story which is much more fun and cherished by many about how when they chased the Greeks out of the temple in Jerusalem, they went looking for consecrated oil to rededicate it. This was, as I said before, part of the process of rededicating the land of Israel, cleansing it from the pagan Greek influence and all that stuff. A lamp was burning in the temple because of what is written in Exodus chapter 27, verses 20 and 21. Command the Israelites, or the Israelis, to bring you clear oil of pressed olives for the light, so that lamps may be kept burning. In the tent of meeting outside the curtain that shields the ark of the covenant law, Aaron and his sons are to keep the lamps burning before the Lord from evening till morning. This is to be a lasting ordinance among the Israelites for generations to come. But according to the story, despite looking everywhere, they could only find one small jar of consecrated oil to burn in the lamps, and it would take several days to consecrate more oil according to the sacred procedures. So they did the best they could and poured this one small jar of oil, which was usually just enough for a single day, into the lamp and lit it. However, a miracle occurred, and instead of burning for just one day, this lamp burned for 8 days, which was long enough to produce more consecrated oil. Now, it is from the story that I just told you that many of the most cherished traditions of Hanukkah are derived, including the lighting of 8 days' worth of candles in the menorah and eating foods fried in oil like potato latkes and donuts, or sufganiot as they're called in Hebrew. But friends, I'm very sorry to have to tell you that the story about the miracle of the consecrated oil burning for 8 days is from the Talmud and was not written down until almost 600 years after the Hasmonean revolt. Now, I know there are a lot of strong emotions regarding the Talmud, with some people holding it in great respect and others having a very different view. For our purposes, it's enough to say that even the Talmud's biggest fans acknowledge that it contains much that is ahistorical, and this is almost certainly one of those ahistorical stories. Be that as it may, I encourage everyone to go read the books of the Maccabees. You can find them easily online, or if you've got a Catholic or Greek Orthodox Bible, you can find them in there. You can also read Josephus's historical account of how Jews in the Second Temple period, which was the time of Yeshua's first advent, marked this occasion. On that note, I want to move on to the only place this holiday is mentioned in the Bible's Protestant canon, and that's the Gospel of John, chapters 10, verses 22 to 24. And I found this Bible dated 1901, over 100 years old. That's why it's wrapped in this yellow covering. And so it says, "And it was the feast of the dedication at Jerusalem. It was winter, and Jesus was walking in the temple in Solomon's porch. The Jews therefore came round about him and said unto him, How long dost thou hold us in suspense? If thou art the Christ, the Messiah, tell us plainly." So, friends, here's where, in my humble opinion, the holidays of Hanukkah and Christmas have more than just a coincidental bond, but rather a prophetic convergence. Perhaps it's no coincidence at all that this year the Feast of Dedication starts on December 25th, the traditional day of Christmas. Now, one commentary on Hanukkah I read many years ago says, quote, "It represents the victory of faith over the ways of speculative reason and demonstrates the power of the miracle in the face of mere humanism." I'm not a great theologian, friends, but the miracle of the virgin birth, which is what Christmas is pointing us to, even if this often gets lost in all other noise that has come to surround this holiday, is another example of this. Now, if Mary, whose name was Miriam in Hebrew, hadn't been a virgin and become pregnant by a miracle of the Holy Spirit, then the birth of Yeshua wouldn't have been anything special. Yeshua himself would not have been anything special. Now, in the Western world today, we've gotten to a point where secular humanism is the dominant viewpoint. Even among many who declare themselves to be Christian or Jewish, science and human reasoning have been elevated to a status reserved for God, and those things have, for all intents and purposes, replaced God and thus earned the name idols, which I am not embarrassed to give them. This is also another reason we are seeing a rise in global anti-Semitism, because the darkness hates the light, and the dominant culture based on Hellenistic pagan idolatry is opposed to the Judeo-Christian heritage we get from the Bible. In all this talk about a new world order and a global reset, just foolish people reasoning among themselves? Or is it the foreshadowing of an evil, false messianic figure who will try to subjugate and assimilate all of humanity into a new world order, just as the Seleucids tried to subjugate the Jews of Judea back in 167 BC? Now, we're getting into some pretty heavy stuff here, friends, but these holidays are not meant to be heavy times. In fact, they're meant to be lighthearted times of love, laughter, and fun spent with your family. Now, I enjoy lighting the Hanukkah candles, and I think we can see a picture of Yeshua in this custom. The proper way to light them is by lighting the shamash, which, if we translate into Greek, gives us the word deacon, the servant of all the others, or the helper candle, and first with a match, and then use the flame from this candle to light all the others, such as we see here, from my left to right. This is a picture of how Yeshua, who called himself the light of the world in John chapter 8, verse 12, receives that light from his Father in heaven and then gives it to the rest of us if we're willing to receive it. So once again, everybody, drink up that eggnog and eat those gingerbread cookies this December 25th, but save some room for some latkes and donuts, sufganiot, then light up the candles on the menorah and sing some songs together with your loved ones. And so I'm just going to share with you one of those traditional jelly donut sufganiot. As you can see here, all the wonderful types that we have and make here in Israel. So there's one for me and one for you. Now let us sing to the tune. Candles were lighting on Hanukkah, blessings reciting on Hanukkah, fried foods were biting on Hanukkah, family uniting on Hanukkah. La 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 la. Happy Hanukkah from Barry Segal and Vision for Israel.